Hi, my name is Kurt Hitty. I'm a partner at Barnes & Thornburg. I recently retired from the board of directors of the Ronald McDonald House after 10 years, including various officer positions. At Barnes & Thornburg, we're committed to the communities we serve, which includes representing and supporting Indianapolis's most important charities. We certainly count the Ronald McDonald House as one of those charities. Nothing is more devastating to a family than having a sick or injured child. It disrupts family life, work life, and the entire family dynamic, not to mention how scary it can be for the child. If you're exposed to the mission of the Ronald McDonald House, you can see the enthusiasm of the staff and the volunteers with respect to the mission. It truly is infectious. I hope you will join me in supporting the Ronald McDonald House in everything they do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ron Collier. I'm the CEO of Indiana Members Credit Union. Many years ago, over 60 years ago, our credit union was formed around the IU Med Center and the family of organizations that surrounded that med center, one of them being, of course, Riley Hospital for Children. Through the years, we've been honored to do things with the Riley Hospital. And in the last few years, we've become acquainted with the Ronald McDonald House. The Ronald McDonald House is an oasis in a desert of uncertainty for families who have children, some with many dreadful diseases. Talking to the patients' families gives you hope, gives them hope, and we're just very delighted to be part of the Ronald McDonald House. Over the years, we've seen many families who really, they don't have a place to stay, and they want to be near just in case they're called to the hospital. I'm not sure what these families would do without the Ronald McDonald House. It's probably more so important now than ever before to help out the Ronald McDonald House. We're very grateful to be part of that and plan on continuing that for many years to come.
We feel so strongly about the work they do and knew there was more that we could do for them. Our Ronald McDonald House Affinity debit card is a way for our members to participate in the support. When they use their debit card on a signature transaction, a giveback is generated for the house. This year, Indiana Members Credit Union and our members are happy to contribute $10,000 to Ronald McDonald House of Central Indiana.
Hello? Hello, is anybody there? Have you successfully logged in? Oh, there you are. Good evening, everyone. I'm McDonald's Chief Happiness Officer, Ronald McDonald, but I think you already knew that. I want to officially welcome you all to the 2020 Taste at Home event benefiting the Ronald McDonald House Charities of Central Indiana. However, tonight's event's a little different than years past. You see, tonight we've reimagined the event and gone virtual. The Taste Gala has transformed into the Taste at Home event. I hope you're ready to have a great time while also celebrating and supporting the Ronald McDonald House. And now to get things kicked off, I'd like to introduce your host for the evening and my very good friend, CEO of the Ronald McDonald House Charities of Central Indiana, Karen Ogden.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the bourbon tasting of Taste at Home. I'm Karen Ogden, as my close personal friend Ronald McDonald just shared. And Ronald, I just want to tell you, here's a hug right back to you. So for all you veteran tasters out there, I know some of you have these socks. Now is the time to put them on. So join me. Let's have some fun tonight. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have so many of you joining us for our second night of online taste. And I want you to know, last year, for those of you who attended, we listened hard to all the feedback that you shared, and you said, let's taste some more things besides wine. Tonight or through this next week, we'll taste 4 things. So last night, beer, tonight, bourbon, next week, wine and chocolate. So we listened, we heard you. So I know that it's not as glamorous as it's been in the past, and know that from our end, we're just happy that we figured out how to do it and all be together through the magic of technology. So we hope that you'll enjoy the celebration while we all stay safe and distant. Whether you're with your friends or you're in your jammies, we're just happy you're with us. So taste isn't just an important part of our fundraising plan. It's a very important part of that, yes. But it's also an opportunity that we get annually to celebrate the mission of the Ronald McDonald House and share with you what we've done. So happy to be here together. So just like at your house, life at our house has changed too in 2020. We've had to adapt and be flexible while remaining strong and resolute in our work to keep families close to their children in the hospital. COVID has certainly caused some significant interruptions in how we help families. I remember back at the height of the pandemic, we had a small number of families staying in the house. We were operating with a skeleton crew here at the house. We'd ask many of our staff to work remotely. And at one point, we provided housing for families at a partner hotel because we couldn't house them at the house. We even had to pause our volunteer program and our meal groups. But good news, we're bouncing back. Our staff are returning to work in person, albeit in shifts, and we're slowly bringing back volunteers to the house, which is wonderful. We have missed them terribly. We've also hit our new COVID era capacity of 33 families, and it's all things that we're celebrating tonight. But right now, we want to celebrate the fact that you have joined us tonight. It is support from individuals and companies like yours that's allowed us to keep the doors to the house open and safely serving families. And we know it's been a tough year financially for many, and we appreciate those of you that made the support of the Ronald McDonald House a priority, especially in an environment for some where sponsorship dollars may not have been as readily available. Your support has been critical, and now more than ever. So thank you. So I'd also like to give a special thanks and a shout out to our food and beverage partners tonight that donated despite their own industry being especially hard hit. And lastly, I'm happy to share gratitude with our 2020 Taste at Home sponsors and event partners. They are Vallejo Financial Advisors, Barnes & Thornburg, McDonald's Owner-Operators of Central Indiana, Nordstrom, Indiana Members Credit Union, Performance Contracting, Inc., First Merchants Bank, Messer Construction, Trendy Minds, the National Bank of Indianapolis, Republic National Distributing Company, Hotel Tango, and West Fork Whiskey. I also want to extend a special thanks to our presenting partner and sponsor, Riley Hospital for Children at Indiana University Health. To all of you at Riley, know that we are honored to be your partner in providing care, hope, and healing for children and their families. So if you've been following our journey in 2020, you know that we've had to close temporarily the house inside Riley at the onset of the pandemic. The closure, though, really helped us bring to light how much families rely on the house for meals, for snacks, for respite. And having the house closed, it's actually creating an opportunity for us to strengthen and grow our programs. I'm excited to let you know that we'll soon begin, very soon, updating and remodeling the house. It's going to help us better prepare and provide meals for families. It will open with a facelift and I hope a bang in May of 2021. So I could go on about the terrific team at Riley, all the folks in nursing and social work and outpatient care, and of course, leadership. We appreciate all those folks and love them. And our relationship has certainly been strengthened and grown in the past 8 months. And one of those special people is Marissa Kiefer. She's a friend and a Ronald McDonald House board member. And she's also the vice president of strategy for Riley's Children's Health. So I'd like to welcome her to the screen to share a message with you all.
Good evening. I'm Marissa Kiefer, Vice President of Strategy at Riley Children's Health. Thank you for joining us for tonight's virtual Taste Gala. Riley is proud to be the title sponsor for tonight's event. As the state's only comprehensive children's hospital, we see patients from every corner of the state. And we would not be able to do what we do every day without amazing partners like the Ronald McDonald House. We have partnered with the Ronald McDonald House since 1982 to keep families together when children are receiving care at Riley Hospital for Children. In 2021, we're excited to expand that partnership with the opening of a new Ronald McDonald House family room in the maternity tower at Riley Hospital for Children at IU Health. Thank you for your support of this amazing organization and have a great evening.
So families with a newborn in the intensive care unit make up the majority of our house guests. And so we know, as Marissa talked about, that having a Ronald McDonald family room close by will be critical in helping moms and dads recharge, especially in that NICU area. So thank you, Marissa. We're excited to share in the growth with you. So just to recap, that's 2 Ronald McDonald spaces in Riley next year. So you'll recall earlier that I said one of the things we like to do at Taste is to celebrate the work of the Ronald McDonald House. So in 2019, we are proud to have served more than 5,500 families, accounting for more than 20,000 overnight stays. And what you might not know is that 90% of those families live more than an hour away. We care for families throughout the state, as well as neighboring states, and even internationally. And for some of those families, they log a lot of travel time to get here, and they can't just turn around and go back home for essentials. It's a lot of families spending a lot of time far from home. And that's why the Ronald McDonald House, with your help, makes such an impact on their lives. So in addition to a room stay, we also nourish people's spirits with warm meals. We provide comfort and relaxation from a tough day in the hospital. And we foster a sense of community and bonding to help families who know what others are going through push through some of the hardest struggles they'll ever face. So I want to share a video with you of 3 lovely families that stayed with us recently that really illustrates how much the house means to them and other families.
When families are going through a time like with a sick child, there are so many things that they need.
A lot of our families, by nature of having children that are sick enough to need a heart transplant, I feel are very stressed. They're in a new environment in the hospital, away from their home, away from their family.
Being able to connect a family with Ronald McDonald is just a huge relief, I think, for us as social workers, knowing that as a hospital that we have that huge resource. That partnership with Ronald McDonald has been a huge benefit. Maybe you don't realize how beneficial something is until it's not there, and we've certainly seen that now.
Yeah, we really weren't even going to apply because we heard it was so hard to get into, and with COVID, we had no idea if we were going to get in or not.
If it was open or not.
Like if we didn't have the Ronald McDonald House, because I wouldn't think I'd be able to stay at home while my child is in Indianapolis and she's in the hospital and she needs her parents.
The tumor removal surgery, we needed someplace to stay because we had to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we live over 2 hours away in Fort Wayne. So the social workers got a hold of Ronald McDonald House for us, and we actually stayed for the first time the night before her tumor removal surgery.
The Ronald McDonald House does many things. First and foremost, it keeps families close.
Having the Ronald McDonald House close by can actually be sort of a life-saving resource, because we like to have the family stay there after heart transplant for anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months until they get adjusted to that new environment.
Did a lot for my nerves, actually, being that close. Now I'm at the point where if I'm farther than the Ronald McDonald House, I'm
anxious, ready to
get back.
To be that close, it really took the weight off our backs. If my baby need anything, I know I can just be there like a snap of the finger or a blink of an eye or something.
There's no closer spot than being at the Ronald McDonald House, and having families be in a safe environment that's that close can be a pretty big difference for these families.
She can sleep in and get the good rest that she would need in order to, hit that day that she's gonna have, whatever treatment it might be.
Well, because of Ronald McDonald House, and we're able to focus more on going to see our daughter and spending time with her and not having to worry about making dinner tonight or paying for the hotel or paying for gas to get back and forth from Lafayette. We get to just focus on Alani and
her health.
Yeah.
Because with the Ronald McDonald House, you don't have to worry about your next meal, because they're going to have it there.
They often provide a welcome basket for the family that might have some pasta and pasta sauce and some toiletries and things for them.
Toiletries and stuff like that. Anything that you need, they'll make sure you have it. So
a lot of times it's things that we didn't even realize that we needed at that time, and it comes at the right time.
The personal touches that Ronald McDonald House is able to make.
They have this little dog named Mac. He's like a therapy dog. He's just cuddly and soft, and I don't know, he just makes you feel good.
Is Mac your friend? Yeah. We try to play fetch with him, don't we?
For anybody thinking about donating, just know any little thing helps.
It doesn't matter how small your donation is. It doesn't matter what bit of time that you can give to help prepare a meal, whatever it might be. Families are so grateful for it. And they would not be able to make it really without that.
I know there are people before me that had to go through the same situation. And if I wouldn't have donated and the other people wouldn't have donated, there could be, a chance that one less person doesn't get in.
It is an opportunity for you to give back and make a difference.
Without people's generosity and kind hearts, it would be a struggle for families like us.
I can't say thank you enough.
There's a lot of hope that goes through that building.
That other people are out there that care enough to take the time to think about others.
So they're doing that out of the kindness of their heart, so that's really big, because it seems like since we've
been dealing with all this, it's like faith in humanity is restored. There are good people.
It warms my heart, inspires me so much to hear the families share that this house is filled with hope. And I'm sure, like all of us here, you fell in love with the families who shared their stories with you tonight. And I feel like I can speak for all of us that we're grateful and thankful for each one of them taking the time to do it. And I also know that you'll join me from home, sending our deepest condolences to the two families whose precious children sadly passed after the production of our video. We'll forever hold them in our hearts. And I'm honored to know that their lives were made easier in a small way by staying at the Ronald McDonald House. So we'd like to share another family Ronald McDonald story with you live tonight. Chad and Emily Hinton experienced the Ronald McDonald House firsthand in 2011 when their infant daughter suffered a life-changing brain injury. They lived the day-to-day difficulty of dealing with a very sick child with the aid of their family and their friends and comforts provided by the Ronald McDonald House. And several of their friends came together for their daughter Elena's first birthday to purchase a table at the annual taste event, a tradition that has continued and grown over the last 8 years. Elena is now 9 years old, and although she suffers lasting effects from her injury, she is a bright-eyed, joyous girl who is a light and inspiration to her family and her community. Chad and Emily reside in Zionsville with their 3 children, Elena, who's 9, Calvin, who's 6, and Turner, who's 4. Please help me welcome the Hinton family.
Hi, Karen.
Hello. Hi, Chad and Emily.
Hi.
How are you tonight?
We're great. Thanks for having us, Karen.
And I know you're hosting your own party, so we promise not to take you too far away from your friends tonight. But want to ask you a couple of questions. Could you share just a little bit about your experience and maybe 1 or 2 things that impacted you most from your stay at the house?
Sure. So our personal experience was actually about the Ronald McDonald House that was in Riley. Our daughter was an inpatient for 20 days. And so we spent a lot of time at Riley in the Ronald McDonald House downstairs. And for me personally, it was the respite that the Ronald McDonald House provided. It was a place to go that had comfort, that had amenities, that had services that you needed just to take that break from that hospital room, to take a break from that reality that, you know, your child is laying there in that bed sick and you could take a moment for yourself and go somewhere and get a meal, just sit on a couch that felt like home and get that moment of peace and that moment of respite. That was so critical to me during that time.
Yeah, and Karen, as you know, this has such a special place in our hearts for many reasons. And it's always bittersweet this time of year that 9 years ago, on November 3rd, is when Elena suffered her brain injury. And so to this day, 9 years ago exactly, we were in the Ronald McDonald House and experiencing the love and the compassion and the thoughtfulness, everything that it brings, we experienced it. And, you know, in watching the videos at the beginning of the program where it talked about families and collaboration with other families that may be going through the same hardships and experiencing those, it just speaks so much to me, you know, and I'm so grateful for all of the people at the Ronald McDonald House, because that enabled us to be surrounded by all the people that are here tonight with us, and as we continue this tradition. And I'm so grateful for everybody and everyone here that's watching. I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the Ronald McDonald House. for what you all have done and what you continue to do for so many families. No one ever thinks or plans or expects to be put into that situation. No one ever thinks or plans or can expect to know what to do, feel, or how to react. And the mundane variables of just where to go to take a shower, where do you get a cup of coffee, where are you going to go sit to have some peace and quiet so you can think about the decisions that you have to make as it relates to your child's health care. It's just so incredibly valuable. So we are so honored to continue to be here, hopefully in this way, supporting the Ronald McDonald House this year and past years and in future years. And we would just like to ask everybody that's viewing and participating. I know, Karen, we may not be to that part of the program, but now more than
Chad,
ever,
there's always a good time. Go ahead. There's always a good time.
Yeah, I just, we're not all together in the big room when we can feel it, but I hope that you can feel it through my voice here tonight, that Ron McDonald House needs your generosity. These families need your generosity. And we hope that we can lead the charge and help that tonight.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you so much for being with us. And thanks for all you do for us and all the friends that you have brought to learn about us. We can't thank you enough. Bless your wonderful family. Hug your children for us. Thank you both very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Karen.
So what the Hinton family shared, it's not an isolated experience. Our family stories are all different, though. Some celebrate life, some grieve loss. Some found respite, love, comfort, all at the Ronald McDonald House. So daily, we commit to working hard. We think about it all the time, how we can provide all that a family might need for a meaningful stay at the house, and one that helps and strengthens their healing journey together. So my friends, this is where you come in. Your support is what makes the house possible. You can be the welcoming beacon of light at the end of a dark day. Now, come on, you've already demonstrated your commitment tonight by joining us. We thank you for that. So I ask you, would you consider making an additional gift of support? Could you give a gift that would help us provide clean, crisp linens on a warm, comfy bed? Could you consider a gift, one that will help keep our pantries stocked with snacks and meals? Or one that would allow us to help families when they need it most? We know it costs approximately $100 to operate a room for a night. And I assure you, you have my word, we never turn a family away if they can't afford to pay. But to do that, we rely on the generosity of you all, supporters like you, to help us to keep our services affordable to everyone. So would you consider a gift of $5,500 tonight would honor each family we served last year? A gift of $1,300 would underwrite the average stay for a family. Typically, it's 13 nights. $500 would fund a week's stay, and $100 would underwrite one night for a family. We hosted over 20,000 overnight stays last year. So know this, and our friend Lori Henry said it in the video, every gift, oh my goodness, every gift that you give in any amount is important, and it helps us be that hope for families. So tonight and during the next 2 nights next week, we want to raise an additional $75,000. Now I know you might think, Karen, $75,000. Well, we can do it. We can with your help. And so if you look on your screen, you can see the heart fill as we get closer to our goal. We need your help. Can you help us get the heart to the halfway point tonight? On your mobile device. And I know all of you have one out. So get that mobile device out and use our text to give platform. And when you do, your name and look at the heart fill, I can see it from here. And when you do, your name will show up and the heart will fill. So you can text RMHCCIN, and that's simply Ronald McDonald House Charities of Central Indiana, if you want to know the clue there. So text RMHCCIN to 74121, and then the text will take over the rest. Follow the link provided to make your donation. When you choose your text to give, again, we can see the progress, fill the hearts. So if you are a check writing person, that's awesome. We'll take it. Send it in, mark it for taste, and we'll make sure it gets counted towards our event total tonight. Thank you. On behalf of the staff and the volunteers and the board, and most importantly, the families, thank you all for your generosity. And I hope that you've seen just a small fraction of the number of people and the way your support impacts their lives. So we're going to watch the heart fill for a few minutes, and then we're going to give you time to give and then get ready because the tasting is coming up next. We'll be back and ready to do that in just a few minutes. Wow. Look what happens when friends come together for a great cause. So our goal tonight is to get to half of that $75,000 goal. We have 2 events next week, and so there's still time to give. But thank you all so much for helping us move that needle and get us up there. Wonderful, wonderful progress. So now it's time for the fun to begin. I hope you have your kits ready as we kick off our master class tonight. We've been able to connect last night and tonight with some of the best master craftsmen and connoisseurs for our tasting. So tonight we'll welcome Michael Gray. Now a little bit about Michael. He's a beverage professional. His passion for education within all the tiers of the alcohol industry came after spending a decade on the on-premise hospitality segment, operating some of the best bars and restaurants in the country. Michael's experiences have led him to a position that will enable him to guide the industry into the future. As a marketing manager for the craft spirits portfolio within one of the largest distributors in Indiana, Michael hopes to continue to bring the culture, history, and passion of the beverage producers from around the world to his consumer base. So we're lucky enough to be that consumer base tonight. His current certifications include a spirits and specialist certification through WSET, CSS, and more. So just to get us started, I learned a couple of things talking to Michael earlier tonight. And so one thing, as you can see, we were prepared tonight. Michael instructed us to open our bottles so that they could breathe. And so we did that. So a couple of questions, a couple of best practices. We had questions, Michael. So would you mind if I ask you a couple just to make sure we get everybody right set for the tasting?
Oh, absolutely. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time. And I look forward to spending the next hour with you.
Well, we're delighted to be with you. So a couple of things. I'm kind of a newbie about bourbon. My family is not, but I am. So one of the things I was thinking about is, should we be tasting? I have a little cup of ice here. Should I be tasting on ice?
Yeah, so when it comes to spirits tastings, definitely not the same way that you're going to go about tasting beer or wine. And there is no wrong or right way in the way that you want to go about doing it. I oftentimes go to these tastings and I see other people harassing each other because they're pouring water into their spirits, or they're tasting it on an ice cube, or so on and so forth, the kind of glass they're tasting out of. And what I want everyone to know, it doesn't matter if this is your first time going through a tasting or if you've done this hundreds of times. Do what makes sense for you. There is some research that's been done that says that with a very, very small amount of water added to a spirit, that it allows the spirit to open up. And it allows it to release esters, and esters are the compounds within spirits that give us aroma and flavor. And but a lot of people, or some people, will add too much water or not enough water, and it's really, again, it's all about personal preference. If you add too much water, what's going to happen is you're going to dilute the spirit, which means that the proof that it was bottled at. So if it's an 80 proof bourbon, and you add water into that, you're going to take the proof, the percentage of alcohol within that spirit, you're going to take it down automatically. And that's okay. Again, there's no wrong or right way. It's all about personal preference. More experienced drinkers will say we don't want to add anything to it, because if they're trying something that's at a higher proof, they will want to taste the actual alcohol content within the product to be able to try to determine what their palate's picking up from that proof. And it's really, really fun. Actually, I've got to spend a lot of time with whiskey producers around the country. And one of my favorite things that I got to do was proofing cask strength bourbons right directly from the barrel at different proofs. And it's absolutely astonishing the difference you can detect in different flavor profiles and nuances from taking a whiskey that comes out of the cask at, let's say, 120 proof, and you proof it down to 90, and then 92 or 94, 96, 98, and kind of watching that roller coaster of flavors that happens. And the bourbon doesn't get worse or better, it just changes. And sometimes you'll get more fruit aromas, sometimes you'll get more caramel, toffee, vanilla. Sometimes you'll pick up more of the char from the barrel, and it really is just it's a fun experience to be a part of. Not making one or the other wrong or right. So I encourage you all at home to do it the way that you see best. And as you can tell from my setup here, I have a Glencairn Glass, which is a style of glassware. And this one has been used for a long time. And this is a Scottish or Irish style of glass. And what happens with this glassware is that it's a bulb shape with a very narrow nose, meaning that when I go to, and we'll kind of get into a little bit of how to go about approaching tasting bourbons or spirits in general. But what happens is those aromas will kind of neck their way or funnel their way up to your nasal cavity and allow you to pick up those esters we talked about earlier. Allow you to pick them up right away. With a more broad glass like this right here, one that has a more open mouth, a lot of those aromas, they're going to be coming out around the sides of the glass, and they're not going to allow them to kind of funnel right up into where you want them. So again, it doesn't matter what kind of glassware you're using at home. It's totally fine. For tonight's purposes, I just thought we'd cover that real quick. And if you're a beginner at tasting spirits and you want to start geeking out over things like this, maybe go out to your local liquor store and pick up a few Glencairn glasses just for your own personal use. It's not like this is what you're going to be taking flavored vodka shots out of with 20 friends. So I don't advise going out and buying 20 of these, but maybe just a couple for your own personal use, because they are a little on the expensive side.
So do it the way you want to do it is what I heard you say. An individual experience. I love that. Appreciate that. And then there's also another school of thought that says that you need to, it's kind of like exercising. You need to breathe properly as you taste. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, the big concern is that if you don't have your mouth open, so I just mentioned it briefly, but those esters and aromas coming out of the nose of the glass is important that you start there first, right? When you go to taste spirits, this isn't taking a shot. This isn't just chugging something back. You're doing it for the experience of actually evaluating the spirit itself. You're not, yes, we do like the effect that alcohol has on us, so the intoxication part is a benefit, but it's not the goal, right? The goal is to actually identify what you're tasting that the producer has spent so much time and passion and love and care on, and to do that properly, it all starts with aroma. We as people, the majority of what we taste on our palate actually comes from our nose. It's the aromas we pick up first that tell our brain what to tell our palate to taste. So if you're smelling some really spicy food and you go and you take a bite of that spicy food, of course your palate's immediately going to go to, well, this is spicy, and so on and so forth. But that's the biggest thing. And if you don't have your mouth open, if you don't open your nasal cavity all the way through to the back of your throat, then what'll happen is the alcoholic vapors will kind of collect in your nasal cavity, and they'll fry them out. And really, you've just kind of destroyed everything else you're going to taste after that first one. So that's the first step, right? Is knowing that you want to go in and you do want to get a nose full. Now, this is where we talked about it being different than wine or beer. With beer, beer's got a big frothy, foamy head on top of it, and you can really just kind of take your glass and put it right up to your nose, and you can get all the aromas right off the head. With wine, same thing, right? As and I don't know if you guys have done the wine session yet, but when you go through wine tasting, they'll probably talk about really diving right in, right? Sticking your nose right into the glass, swirling it around, letting it open up, letting it breathe, and then just kind of going right in for a big old whiff of whatever's inside that glass. With spirits, do not do that. And then that's the quickest way to burn out your nasal cavity. With spirits, you really want to take a slower approach. There really is no need to swirl the spirit in the glass. That's a wine thing. And while you did mention opening the bottles up to breathe a little bit, that is good. But once it's in the glass, it's not going to breathe any more or any less. It is basically there, and the alcoholic vapors, the esters, aromas are all right where you want them. So take a very subtle approach and go in and keep your nose about 1 inch to 2 inches away from the rim of the glass. And again, keep your mouth open and take that breath in through your nose. And if anyone is having allergy problems because of the weather fluctuating like I am, this is a horrible time to do this, because like I'm taking 2 Claritins a day, right? It's not any fun. But no, yeah, it's that time of year. But yeah, so keep the glass 1 inch or 2 away from your nose. Kind of take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Again, allowing the alcohol vapors to pass through in a pleasant way. If you were to get those trapped into the back of your nasal passage, again, you're going to fry it with high alcohol content. So try to let that pass through. Do that a few times and start to think about some of the aromas you're picking up on. Are you picking up on banana bread? Are you picking up on cereal, toffee, caramel, vanilla, char, oak? What all are you experiencing from that particular aroma? Think about that before you even take your first sip.
Okay, now wait a minute. Before you go any further, so I'm going to take a drink. I'm going to open my mouth, take a breath in through my nose, out through my mouth. That's a lot to do at once. That's kind of challenging. But did I get that right?
Yeah, so take that aroma first, not the drink first. Do the aroma first.
Just the aroma, okay.
Yeah, do the aroma first. So get your first couple of sniffs in on that, what you're picking up there. Again, keeping your nose just far enough away from the glass that it's not too extreme. And let that go through a couple times. And set the glass down and step away from it for just a second, because immediately a lot of people will take that first sniff and then they'll toss it down the hatch. And that's not really what we want to do with this, right? And to do this alongside with you, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start with our first sample. And we'll talk about the sample, but I think that having something in the glass to kind of show you is better than not. So which one are we starting? So for standardized tasting, I recommend a 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce per taste. Again, a benefit of consuming alcohol or the effects, but we want to be responsible in our consumption. So I always advise on doing that responsibly.
Exactly.
Right, yeah. So I've got my 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce of bourbon in my glass here, and just like you said, right, going in at first and keeping the glass, a little bit away from the nose. And I know you can't see me breathing, but I am. So I'm breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth. I do that 2 or 3 times. And with Hotel Tango bourbon, what I pick up on a lot is a lot of that banana, is a lot of that caramel, toffee, a little bit of spice, and maybe a little bit of green apple. Just from the rye being in there. And sometimes rye has that effect of coming off as apple and aroma, but more black pepper and white pepper and spice on the palate. But we'll get into that as we talk through the Hotel Tango tasting notes. But that's the first approach, right? Hello? We're still there?
Yep, still here.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, I thought I heard a disconnect.
That's
but
okay. No, I was trying to find the right bottle. I was sniffing the wrong one, but it was lovely. I did all that I to do.
Yeah, and that right there, once you've already evaluated it mentally on what it's going to smell like, then you can start to think about, again, your brain is going to train your palate on what to taste. So then that's when, you can take your first sip, and you can approach the bourbon, and get the mouthfeel, the viscosity of the spirit itself, and then all the different nuances that you're going to pick up on as you're tasting.
Okay, so it's time to do that now. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. And a small amount, right? Just enough to put a little bit on your tongue and to swirl around and coat the inside of your mouth. It is important that you coat your palate. So you push that spirit from your tongue over to your cheeks, and then obviously, down through the back of your throat and swallowing the spirit, consuming the spirit. And if you're not a big drinker and you're doing one of these tastings and you have multiple items to taste, there is nothing wrong with not consuming all of the alcohol.
Being wise, isn't it? Being careful and safe. I like
Yeah,
it.
it's being careful, it's being safe, and depending on the setting, I mean, I'm sure if some of you on here have been to any of the big tastings that we do, like the holiday tastings at Big Red or Crown Liquors or any of the big retailers, you go into these facilities and you could try dozens of samples in one day. And again, just not smart to overconsume. So, if you want to try them all and then spit them out, like I have a small empty glass here in front of me, and that can either be used as a dump cup or a spit glass. So again, I highly encourage you to do it the way that you best would like to consume the spirit and enjoy the spirit. Okay, so that's a little bit about tasting. And again, we're not going to dwell too much on Hotel Tango yet because we're going to talk about them more in detail here soon. One of the next things I wanted to touch base on, and I think is really important when talking about bourbon and as a category of spirits, is understanding a little bit about the history and what goes into bourbon production and what makes bourbon bourbon. Until you can kind of understand the foundation, it's hard to start diving into individual brands and producers and identifying why they're so different. So I'd like to take a few minutes here to just kind of touch base on that. So bourbon has been produced in the United States for quite some time. And we all, we talked about this earlier, but we all have been under the assumption or misconception that bourbon has to be made in Kentucky, right?
That's right.
That was one of the greatest marketing ploys that Kentucky ever could have gotten away with. And while it is legally defined that bourbon has to be made in the United States, there's nothing in our legislation that says that bourbon has to be made from Kentucky. And Kentuckians are very proud that 95% of the bourbon made in the U.S. is made in Kentucky and always has been. So there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not the law. The law states that bourbon must be made in the U.S. with water from the United States of America, that it must be made with 51% corn. So when we talk about spirit production, as we look through different categories of spirits, whether it be vodka, gin, rum, whiskey, tequila, they're all derived from organics, right? They're all derived from plants for the most part. And it was funny, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier about they didn't realize that beer is the base for whiskey. And that's very much true, right? What we actually call whiskey before it gets distilled, but before it gets put into a still and rectified, we call it wort. We call it wash. And it's basically a brewer's wort. And you take a non-cleaned or non-refined beer, and that's your wash. That's the base of your whiskey. So it's made from grains, and that's the important part. We won't talk about all the other spirit categories. We just don't have time tonight. But whiskey is made from grain. It's made from corn, barley, rye, and wheat. Primarily, those four are the majority grains that are used to make whiskey across the world. Whether you're talking about Scotch or Irish whiskey or Japanese whiskey, Canadian whiskeys, it doesn't really matter. They're all made from cereal grains. So that being said, we just said that one of the laws that makes bourbon bourbon is that it's at least 51% corn. So that gives the producer a lot of wiggle room and a lot of play room when it comes to designing what we call, and what you'll hear some people call, the mash bill, right? The mash bill is kind of the percentages that of the different grains that are used in that particular whiskey. And again, what is the dominant grain? It's corn. So that's what makes it very American, is that one of our largest crops that we grow here in the United States is corn.
How much of what we grow in America is used for that? Do you know? We grow a lot of corn.
No, we grow a lot of corn, and we grow a lot of corn for a lot of different reasons.
Right, that's true.
We grow corn for livestock, for human consumption, for whiskey production, and not only do we grow different types of corn for different reasons, but we also have different heirlooms of corn. And if any of you are really into this whole grain to bottle type understanding of how whiskey's made, I would highly encourage you to go spend some time down in southern Indiana at Starlight Distillery, which is also known as Huber Winery or Huber Orchards. And they are one of the biggest agro-tourism destinations in Indiana. And also, Ted Huber, one of the owners, is one of the biggest kind of researchers of what different heirlooms of corn have different starch contents that produce different styles of whiskey. And it's very experimental, but really cool too. But that's like the super geeky side of what we're doing. If you're just getting into spirits,
there are some of those in our audience. I'm sure there are. And where is that?
Starlight Distillery and Huber Winery. It's in southern Indiana, down in Borden, Indiana, just about 15, 20 miles north of Louisville, Kentucky, off 65. It's a huge agro-tourism destination. And again, you know, a general tourist experience, you may not get that opportunity. But if you go down there, right day, right time, you know, you start talking to some people that work there. You may get Ted Huber pop up and start talking to you about the 8-9 different varietals of corn that he's growing on property, his 800-acre farm he's growing on property, and how he reads the starch contents on the corn and when to harvest them, and the milling and mashing techniques and what he's doing there. And it's really interesting. But again, very much on the geeky side of things. But kind of circle back here, and sometimes I'm sorry you'll have to chase me down because I am kind of like a dog chasing squirrels. I get distracted very easily and start barking up the wrong tree. So bear with me.
That was an interesting tree. I liked it. Different kinds of corn. You really, I mean, that's cooking. That's craftsman. That's really cool. So it's okay. You're right.
It is, yeah. So again, to circle back around, we talked about a few of the laws that make bourbon bourbon. We talked about United States water being used in the U.S. We talked about corn being the primary grain in the mash bill. Barrels. So the next thing is maturation. And what does maturation mean? Maturation is the point in time that a whiskey's been produced. So all of the grains have been mashed, have been milled, mashed, fermented, turned into a beer or a wash or a wort, and now it's time to distill them. We have this beautiful high-proof spirit that's come off the still, what most people would call white whiskey or new make whiskey. And it's all very important for us to know too, right? When whiskey comes off of the still, it is clear. It's as clear as vodka, it's as clear as gin, it's as clear as rum. It is a clear spirit. Whenever a spirit is rectified in a still, they always come off clear. Where do spirits get their color from? Spirits get their color from maturation. And one of the things that the U.S. government did to make bourbon very specific was that they said it has to be aged in new oak barrels, newly charred oak barrels that have only been used one time. And why would they do that? So it's been proven that if you were to reuse a barrel multiple times, it's going to lose a lot of its characteristics that create the maturation process. Also, too, it makes bourbon very unique. Every time you put it into a new barrel, it takes on a life of itself. It doesn't matter if that barrel, and where barrels are made are called cooperages, by the way, and they're made by coopers, and that's kind of a dying art. You won't find many cooperages in the U.S., and you definitely won't find many that you can go visit or tour, but luckily I know some people. So I've gone through a few of these cooperages myself, and it's amazing the techniques that they're still doing today that were done hundreds of years ago to make whiskey. And the fun part is watching them create these staves, these barrel heads, mold these barrels into shape, and then let them air dry or kiln dry, and then char them off. And a lot of people, and we'll talk about this in a few of our whiskeys here soon, but a lot of people want to know about the char level of the barrel. And that does play an important part in the maturation process. It will determine if a barrel has an extreme amount of kind of smoky char flavor, or if it's more on the marshmallowy, vanilla, caramel side. So very soft, very sweet. And we love that, right? Like it could be a char from char level 1 all the way to a char level 4. And some of the industry terms to use to cover like a char level 4 would be like an alligator char. So a barrel that's been charred on the inside very, very heavily that looks like alligator skin. So it's very fun because these producers are picking barrels from different cooperages around the U.S. and all the cooperages are making the barrels slightly different. Even though they have to work within the same legal parameters, they're still all very different. If you were to walk into a whiskey warehouse and you had two barrels sitting side by side, same char level, made by the same cooperage, and they've been aging for the same period of time, I guarantee you both of those whiskeys are going to taste very different. And it's one of those things where it's like science meets artwork. It's science meets craft. They've done all of these things. They made the whiskey all the same batch, same mash bill, everything's been done the same all along. And then the end result are two very different whiskeys. And you kind of scratch your head and you're like, why? And there's really nothing that can explain it aside from the fact of it's imperfect, but it's kind of perfectly imperfect. Because, there's no right or wrong whiskey. Just because this barrel kind of comes off a little sweeter on the lighter side, this one comes off a little more medium bodied, and has different flavor nuances. It doesn't mean one's worse than the other. It just means that they're different. And I love going through that with the producer.
There's no bad bourbon. It's just different, right? That's right.
Right. That's correct. Yeah.
So which one are we tasting first?
So I know I probably kind of threw a wrench in things here by trying the Hotel Tango first, but I do encourage us to try Old Hammer first. And there's a reason to my tasting madness. The bottles are lined up differently. They're kind of lined up by height because I'm a little OCD. But but the way that we would taste bourbon, and I know this is going to be contradicting myself from an earlier statement, but I said, you don't taste spirits the same way you taste wine and beer. But you do taste in a flight the same philosophy that you would, right? So if you were tasting wine and you were doing all reds, you would start with a very light-bodied red wine. And then you might work your way up into a more full-bodied wine, right? So maybe you start off with like a Pinot Noir and then work your way up from, a Malbec to a Cab or something along those lines. And that's the same kind of philosophy with whiskey. You would want to taste your lowest proof first. You'd want to taste something that has a sweeter, more passive flavor profile first. And you would want to work your way up to something that's a little more aggressive towards the end. If you were to start off with your most aggressive flavor profile, then every taste after that is going to kind of be dominated. It's not going to stand out. So Old Hammer is a great example of what we should taste first. Old Hamer is not spelled like hammer, like the tool that you would use to hit a nail on the head and build a deck. It is actually a family name. This particular family, and by the way, I should kind of start over. This whiskey is produced by West Fork Whiskey Company, which is here in Indianapolis, Indiana. West Fork has been around for several years now. They are a locally owned company. A couple of folks started West Fork Whiskey with the dream to make quality whiskeys and bring them to market on a local level. And they're great group of people. Couldn't say enough good things about them. And they started off first with their West Fork brands and had those in the market for a little bit. But because whiskey takes time to age and mature, just like we talked about, right? Whiskey takes several years to age. They started to quickly run out of inventory of the West Fork labels and realized, oh, shoot, we need to do something here to keep bringing whiskey to market, keep our company business stable, and do something really fun and create a project that they believed in. And what they found was a resurrection of an old mash bill or whiskey that used to exist in Indiana back at the turn of the 19th century. And there was a family in Lawrence County, southern Indiana, that the Hamer family that ran a grain mill in Grist. And basically the story of this family is that they would trade products with local traders, and if they had excess corn coming in or excess grains coming in that they didn't have anything to do with, or they couldn't find a place or a way to use it, they would use it to make whiskey. So this is a high corn mash bill. This is actually 99% corn, 1% barley. And because West Fork needed something immediately to take to market, they did not produce this on their own stills or barrel age this, mature this themselves. A lot of whiskey producers these days will go to a company in southern Indiana, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, called MGP. And if you're not familiar with MGP, they are one of the largest whiskey producers in the entire country, Kentucky or anywhere else. And they've been around for a long time. MGP used to be the old Seagram's facility in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, right across the river from Kentucky there. And when they shut down the Seagram's facility, they took this manufacturing facility over and created what is just like, I've never seen anything like it before, and the size and the capacity and their technology and everything that goes into this. It's to a scale of, what you would experience if you were to go to a Jim Beam or a Jack Daniel's. It is at the top end of high volume whiskey and spirit production. And they make a lot of different whiskeys down there. They make vodka, rectified vodka for people, like a Tito's vodka, for instance, that is bottled, labeled out of Texas. They actually buy all of that neutral grain spirit from MGP in southern Indiana. So this is a huge manufacturing facility. And what they do for whiskey producers is that they will make all these different mash builds, all these different lots of whiskey, and a small brand like a West Fork or Old Hamer can go in and say, I'm looking for a very specific mash bill or something very specific, or I want to see a lot of whiskey that you have. And when I say lot, not like a lot in volume, but like lots that are broken down by production. So they may have like lot number 45, and it's 50 barrels of something that they did that's 99% corn, 1% barley. And then the company like West Fork can go in and say, how much for all of that? I want to buy that up, and I want that to be my brand. So very cool that these guys were able to go down. They were able to find a family story that led to a really quality product, and also do it all here locally in Indiana. So they were able to tie it all in together, and I really love it. So 2 years old, and when I say 2 years old, that is the length of time that it was matured in oak barrels. So a minimum of 2 years old. 99% corn, 1% malted barley.
Is it crazy to think that I smell butter in it?
Butterscotch.
Butterscotch.
Yeah, butterscotch.
Okay.
And I haven't even done my initial aroma evaluation yet, so I love that you're one step ahead of me.
Thanks.
Yeah, ton of butterscotch, toffee, caramel. And again, why is that, right? If you think about the way that corn would taste, or corn syrup or corn starch or like anything, that's very much corn. So you've done your aroma evaluation, and what I'd like to do is to go ahead and lead into your first taste evaluation. And for those of you who are really into keeping track of this stuff, there's nothing against having pen and paper, taking notes, because as we all know, after we've enjoyed a few glasses of whiskey, it's hard to remember what you've tasted. And maybe you want to go out in a few weeks and buy another bottle of this. So don't be afraid to take notes at home.
Get paper and pen. Take notes. Good idea.
Only if you want to, but so this one, again, a nice, easy sipper. This is an 80 proof bourbon, which is the standard bottling proof of most spirits. And it's just an easy one. It's an easy one to enjoy. It's not overly complicated, but there's some quality in that simplicity, right? There's like you could have this as a mixer if you're the kind of whiskey drinker or spirit drinker who likes to throw, some soda on it for a highball, or turn it into a cocktail with an old fashioned, whatever the case may be. This is a really easy, just kind of go-to everyday whiskey. Really love it. So,
I was pointing out
after
to our
your
producer, Max, that would be a good one. We talked a little bit about bourbon beforehand, and he likes to mix, and so that would be a good one. Very smooth, though.
Yeah, very smooth. All right, so Old Hamer, great start to our flight here. Next, we'll move right into Hotel Tango. A little backstory here. Hotel Tango is another locally owned company out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Their tasting room and their origins started right here in the Fletcher Place Fountain Square type area. They have a very focused military background. And if you don't keep up with social media or haven't seen them on the news or haven't been to the tasting room or any of the events they've held over the years, Hotel Tango was started by some local folks. And Travis Barnes, Hillary Barnes, and HT, by the way, stands for Hillary and Travis, and the Barnes family. And Travis was he served 3 tours and came back home. And afterwards went to law school and met his wife Hillary at law school. And didn't really know what to do and decided to start making some moonshine in the backyard. Wanted to continue to do that as a career, and lo and behold, years later, somehow got Hotel Tango kicked off. And it's been great to partner with these folks over the years, watch them grow from a very small distillery in a tasting room all the way up to their own distillery over on the 16th and Monon in downtown Indianapolis. And they make a variety of spirits, vodkas, gins, rums, limoncellos, orangecellos, whiskeys. They really kind of do it all. And this 2-year-old bourbon they added to their portfolio within the past couple of years. And I really love it because they initially launched with a reserve bourbon that was a little bit higher in price point. And what I love about this is it's economic, but it's also really good, really complex. And even though they are a local Indiana company, they are not producing this in Indiana. So whereas you have West Fork that sourced all their bourbon from, or not all their bourbon, but this Old Hamer brand from MGP, you have folks like Hotel Tango who have sourced whiskey from another distillery in Ohio called Middlewest Spirits. Middlewest Spirits is actually a company I used to work with in the past as well, and they were also a very small shoestring craft company but Ohio legal distillation happened long before Indiana. So they got a little bit of a head start on making whiskey and having matured, aged whiskey laid down in their warehouse before Indiana could even start producing. So it makes sense that their business lifespan is ahead of some of these local producers in Indiana. And while somebody like, Travis Barnes would go to them and say, hey guys, I really am interested in buying a bunch of whiskey from you. What do you have available? What they found is that because of the mash bill recipe that they enjoyed and they wanted to continue to produce once their stock increased and the longevity of their business life cycle continued to grow, they wanted something they could replicate. So they picked out 2 mash bills from Middlewest, corn, rye, and barley on the first, and corn, wheat, and barley on the second. And after those 2 mash bills have been blended together, it comes out to being about 67% corn, 15% rye, 5% barley. Now with Middlewest, they used to age whiskey in 30-gallon barrels, and now they've switched over to all 53-gallon barrels. And that's something we didn't really talk about during the maturation process that much, but it does impact the ultimate flavor profile of the whiskey when you have a smaller barrel that the whiskey is condensed in versus a larger barrel with a larger inside space circumference. So that does impact that. Middlewest is using Vendome stills, all copper stills, to produce their whiskeys. Absolutely fantastic designs. Vendome makes some of the best stills in the world, and that company is based out of Louisville. So they're making stills for companies or for whiskey producers all over the country. And they're by far producing some quality new make spirits. So Hotel Tango Bourbon. Let's go ahead and pour our sample here in our tasting glass. And immediately, right off the nose, I'm kind of picking up some of that spice from the rye, a little bit of black pepper. And if you don't know how to, if your nose doesn't know how to tell your brain the difference between smelling corn, rye, and wheat and barley, think of it in terms of bread. So if you were to take a piece of cooked rye bread and a piece of wheat bread, and you were to break them and smell the crust, what would it smell like? And rye is always going to have that hint of spice, right? Whether you're thinking about pumpernickel rye or black pepper or white pepper, it's always going to kind of be there. So think about that.
You made me hungry for rye toast now. I'm sorry to go with
it's a little late for toast, but maybe in the morning. But no, when you've done a couple of aroma checks on that, go ahead and dive in for your first taste.
I've already sipped ahead. I'm so sorry. I tasted it already.
No. I'm glad you're getting ahead. I think I'm talking too much because I think I'm going to run out of time.
Well, I know that we have questions, so we want to make sure we've got time for questions, but we've got to taste our, we don't want to miss the other one too, so.
We don't want to miss our last one. That's a good one to finish on. So this is Hotel Tango Bourbon. 2-year-old, great quality bourbon. Been out there on the market for quite some time. A great story, locally owned. And if you guys have any other questions about that, we can get into those during Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and pour out the remainder there. And if you are using the same glass at home like I am, there's nothing wrong with ever doing a rinse in your glass. We kind of talked about that a little bit. But if you feel like you're getting into the number of samples that they're all kind of starting to blend together, go ahead and rinse out your glass and move on to the next one. So the third selection today is New Riff. This is a company out of Kentucky. And maybe you can see a pattern of why I chose these 3 whiskeys. And I work with a lot of different whiskey producers, and it's really hard, right? And I think you asked me a question earlier today where you said, "What's your favorite?" And I said, "That's not really fair." And And by no means are these three my favorites or least favorites or anything, but why I chose these is that you now have had a whiskey from Indiana that's been produced in Indiana and owned by an Indiana company. You've had a whiskey that is produced in Ohio that's owned by an Indiana-based company. And now you're about to have a whiskey that's produced in the Midwest. And what I like about, in Kentucky. So what I like about this is all these were done in the Midwest, right? And it kind of showcases the versatility because we debacled that rumor of, all bourbon has to be made in Kentucky or Bourbon County, Kentucky. It does not. So they can be made anywhere. And now, after tonight, you'll have had a whiskey made in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky. With New Riff, lovely company. Newport, Kentucky is where they're actually located. And so it's not in proper Bardstown, Kentucky, or just outside of Louisville or any of those high tourist destinations you may go to when you go down there, which there are so many lovely distilleries in that area. This one's in Newport, which is, if you've never been to Newport, it's like right across from Cincinnati, but it's in Kentucky, but then it's right across from Indiana. It's like 3 states right there, and one you can throw a baseball and hit all 3. What I love is that this company was founded by a gentleman and his family who used to own one of the biggest liquor stores in Kentucky. And when they sold their liquor store, it was an employee-owned company, by the way, too. When they sold all of these and they came out on the better end of that deal, they decided we're going to open a distillery in the parking lot of one of the liquor stores that they had owned previously. And they created a beautiful state-of-the-art distillery and banquet facility and everything else. And if you look at the back of this bottle, there's a beautiful etching of the distillery with the glass windows in the front. And if you're ever looking for a really fun day trip to get out of Indianapolis, highly recommend headed down to Newport, check these guys out. You will not be disappointed. So they didn't have a lot of capital and a lot of funding at first. So they were very committed to not releasing bourbon until it was at least 4 years old. And because we're running out of time, I'm going to rush through this, and I hate this, but all of their whiskey is bottled in bond. And that is a talking point that I definitely want to touch base on tonight, because a lot of people, they see this, right? They see these whiskeys that say bottled in bond or whatever the case may be, but really bottled in bond doesn't mean a lot to consumers these days. And where did bottled in bond start from? So the origins of bottled in bond were that back when America was first settled, and you had people just making whiskey and apple brandies and things all over the country, and they weren't governed by the federal government. There wasn't a government to really do that. Basically, the way that the government started govern was by creating bottled in bond warehouses. So if you had whiskey or brandy that you wanted to make and you wanted to sell on the market, you had to put it in one of these government-owned warehouses where everything would be taxed, and people did not like paying taxes. So that was a big deal. And then now let's leapfrog over to 2020. Every warehouse in the United States is all taxed. It doesn't matter if it's government owned or independently owned by the producer themselves. It's all taxed. So technically anything can be bottled in bond now if they've done their marketing right, if they've done their aging right. And some of the laws that make bottled in bond is that it's all produced in a single distillation season. And distillation seasons are basically the first half of the year, second half of the year. So all of that spirit had to be made in one single distillation season. It also had to be made by one distillery only. So, for instance, this one, right, like where they've sourced bourbons from other distilleries, they couldn't do a bottled in bond because some of these were blended from other distilleries. It had to be held in a federal taxed warehouse, like we said, and it has to be a minimum of 4 years old. So we didn't really talk about the definition of straight bourbon earlier either, which I'm sorry. Straight bourbon has to be aged for a minimum of 2 years in those newly charred oak barrels. Bottled and bond has to be aged for an additional 2 years, so 4 years total in newly charred American oak barrels. And it has to be bottled at no less than 100 proof. So it is a higher proof spirit, and that's why this is the last one that we're going to finish on tonight. So please go ahead, pour in your glass if you haven't already. Go ahead and take that first aroma. And this one you definitely get a higher strength right on the nose. I mean, you can tell the alcohol vapors are a little bit more prominent. I get a lot of butterscotch on this one. Caramel. And that caramel, sometimes that burnt toffee or like overly heavy caramel can come from the tannins in the oak and the barrel char that they're using. So if they're using a really heavy char, that caramel is going to extract out of the oak as it matures for 4 years. And versus a 2-year-old bourbon, you've given it 2 more years in the barrel to extract all of that tannin and vanillin and all those awesome flavors that come from that inside of that charred barrel.
You said vanilla. That I couldn't figure out quite what it was. I smell more vanilla than
Yeah.
this time, but it's all good.
Yeah, there's
Butter.
a lot of vanilla in there too. And yeah, and we all smell, we all taste differently. So keep in mind that when you're at these tastings with people, smelling and tasting is all subjective to the individual. I sometimes see people like getting shamed by their friends at these things, where you know someone looks to the other and like, I don't get that at all, man. Like, you're crazy. And that's not the case, because we all as human beings, we perceive things differently. The way that we smell, the way that we taste. There's no right or wrong answer. There's definitely some stuff that's off the walls that I'm like, oh, I don't get that, but okay. Like, I keep my comments to myself, right?
It sounds like fine art, right? Everyone interpret it the way they want to, right? It's art.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you may walk through a museum and something may really strike you and resonate with you, but you may walk to that next painting and you may just be like, nah, I don't get it.
Well, twice before I've skipped ahead and tasted. So are we ready to taste? This time I
yeah.
Be patient.
Yeah, please do. Dive right in.
Okay.
Now, see, something that's a little higher proof like this, we talked about this earlier. There's nothing wrong with taking just a drop. And again, it's a very small amount of water that's needed to dilute this. But at that proof, there may be some, and there also may be some bourbon drinkers on this that like cask strength bourbons, 120 proof in the glass bourbons. And that's great. I do too. There's always a time and a place for everything. But if you're new, and this one's coming off as a little hot, right? If it's kind of getting you in the back of the palate, if the alcohol vapors are kind of lingering in the back of your throat, take just a drop or two of water and just add it right in there and see if that doesn't settle that proof down and make it a little bit more where you can pick out flavors that you didn't pick out before. And I would start by not adding water in and then adding it in after you've had your first taste.
I've got to say, Michael, I am not a huge bourbon drinker, but I've enjoyed all 3 of these.
Well, thank you. I didn't make any of them, but I...
Oh, well, forget it. Then I definitely like them.
I work closely with the producers, and they're all good friends of mine, so...
So I'm going to check in with my producer. How much time? Are we ready to jump into Q&A? Okay. All right. So I think I know the answer to this first question, but I want you to answer it. So... Question from someone out there. Can a barrel be used more than once to age bourbon?
No. As we touched on that earlier, for it to be a bourbon legally, it has to be aged in a brand new charred oak barrel.
You're right.
That barrel cannot be used again, and that is why the United States is one of the largest exporters of used whiskey barrels to Scotland, Ireland, France, Mexico. We use a barrel once, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, or 20-year-old Pappy Van Winkle. We use it one time, and then we ship that barrel to another country. We sell that barrel, and it's used again for other things. Now, a bourbon can be aged in that first barrel, that new American oak that's never been used before. It can be aged for 4 years, and then it can go on to being finished for 6 months in a port wine barrel, or a sherry barrel. And it still is a bourbon. It's just a bourbon that's been finished in a port barrel. So there can be multiple barrels used during the aging process, but to be legally defined by the United States government as a bourbon, it has to be aged in brand new American oak.
Okay. So a question from someone else. So how much should a person spend? Someone maybe doesn't know as much about bourbon as you do. How much should a person spend for a good bottle? Should they be going over X amount of dollars for a good bottle? Can you find a good bourbon for under, I'm trying to think of under $20?
Yes. So even, it doesn't matter how much you know about bourbon. I have bottles in my collection that are way too expensive, and I'll never drink or never open.
You'll never drink them or open them?
Well, I don't know. Maybe in a really special occasion. But
can you tell us what one of them is?
Well, so they're actually not bourbons. I feel I'm teaching a master class on bourbon, and I'm thinking about the most expensive bottles I have on my shelf, and they're Japanese whiskeys, Spanish whiskeys. They're like really rare whiskeys from around the world. And someone was asking me about Pappy the other day, and my company sells Pappy Van Winkle, so I would never say anything bad about that brand. I just think that people can overpay sometimes. And really there's some great articles out there about like the top 20 or 30 bourbons under $29.99. And I think there's a lot to those articles, right? And if you really read between the lines, it's like, yeah, you can go out and you can buy $60 bottles, $70, whatever, $200 bottles of whiskey. But really there are a lot of great bottles on the shelf for $29.99. Now, $19.99 or under,
not so much, huh?
Maybe not. And I hate to say that because I don't want to discredit anyone out there who's doing that, because there's probably someone I'm not thinking of that I don't want to hurt their feelings. But there are a quality number of options, $29.99 around that retail price. Okay.
Well, Michael, it has been great getting to know you. Thanks for introducing us to local as well as Midwest varieties of bourbon. Thanks for dispelling the myth. It doesn't have to be made in Kentucky. I've learned a little bit, reminded a little bit. So I've had a lot of fun with this. Thank you. And I think I've gotten a little appreciation for a little bit of bourbon without having anything in it. So it's delightful. So I don't feel like I'm an expert by any means, but I feel like I've learned something. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. And this was a good end to a very political, dramatic week for everyone. So, you can all take a deep breath, enjoy the rest of our whiskey tonight, and hopefully move into some better times.
There you go. Excellent. Well, thanks, Michael. Have a great night as well. Thanks for being with us. Well, I hope that you have had an amazing evening tonight. So I want to tell you, you might be wondering where we're at. Could I get that number, Mr. Producer? $20,655. Well, that is awesome. And I will tell you that we have until midnight tonight to get to half of that 75,000 mark. There's still plenty of time to give. I'm smiling, I'm teasing a little bit, but truly we need your help. So think about that. The text to give, if you know someone who would appreciate our mission, that text to give will be open all through next week as we go through our next events next Thursday and Friday, as we taste wine and then we finish with chocolate. So if you know someone, again, who would appreciate what we do and our mission of bringing hope to families, please share our story and ask them to give. So let me think. Oh, yes. Don't forget, if you took photos tonight, I know many of you were entertaining. So if you've taken photos tonight from your Taste at Home experience, let us know what you thought of the format tonight. Use the hashtag Taste at Home. So again, still donate online, text to give. Options will be on the screen in just a minute. And before we end, I would be remiss if I did not take the opportunity. I have a tremendous tech team here with me, and we've been really good in social distancing. And so can't thank them enough for their work. They've worked really hard on this. The staff team on this event, as well as the Taste Committee for their work over the past several months. And so thank you to the Taste Committee. They're in your program, in your package. So thanks to them. And truly here at the Ronald McDonald House, volunteers with steam in our engine, we could not survive without them. So on behalf of the staff team and our amazing volunteers, including our board members, thank you all for making our mission possible, and have a great night and a great weekend.